So how long have you been in it? Like, how did you, first of all, how did you get into sales enablement would be my first question. I would
That's
love to
a
hear
great.
more about.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great story. So I started out, I was selling. I have about, 6 to 8 years of feet on the street, B2B sales. Um, the company that I was working for, I was more of a solutions consultant role. And the company that I was working for bought the company that I was supporting.
Uh-huh.
And overnight, I was immediately put into a sales enablement, sales training role. So I didn't really get a choice. I was kind of forced into it. But when I started it, I loved it immediately. I mean, it was so fun to just watch the transformation of a sales rep or sales team going from, we didn't really love your product and that's why we didn't sell it, but now we're being forced to sell it and then falling in love with it based
Yeah.
on, what we were doing. So that's how I got into it. And
What do you
that
think,
was
what do you think drove
2006.
them into kind of putting you in that position? Like, why you versus somebody else, do you think?
Well, we were a team. So there were quite a few of us across the US. And we were competing inside of a dealer against different manufacturers, right? So I worked for a specific manufacturer and we were competing, and in my market here in the mid, mountain area, because I'm in Denver, we only had like 30% of the market share for that dealer. And so they didn't care to sell our product. They didn't care to listen to us at the time about our product. And then they got an email just like we all did saying, hey, we own you now. So this is all you're going to be able to sell. So for them, it was kind of do or die because they had to go to all their customers now and say, like, look, they had to learn how to sell it so they could keep the business because it wasn't going to be what was currently in that account.
Yeah.
And we did the best we could. We created a sales strategy. We went straight into a solution selling model, and this was back in 2010. So when all of that was just kind of really coming into fruition and consultative selling was really blowing up. And we brought in a consultant. We wrote a homegrown program based on Spin and Kevin Davis and
Nice.
rolled it out. And I probably taught it 200 times.
I've
Yeah.
I've had the opportunity to work with Spin quite a bit, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I like that as a framework.
It's the foundation, right? I mean, it's been around forever. I
Yeah.
think every good sales strategy is built in some way, shape, or form off of spin selling. I mean, it really was the kickoff to where we are now
Yeah.
from a
And
strategy
so
standpoint.
what was your latest role that you were in?
So I was in working for a life sciences company, and I was the director of sales enablement. They didn't have an enablement function when I started. So I
Yeah.
built that program from the ground up, which is really my niche
Same. Yeah.
thing. That's what I really love to do, especially for growth companies. A lot of people will shy away from growth companies because there's no guarantee. I mean, I would say if you're looking for like a super long term career, don't go work for a growth company. I mean, but I get a lot of satisfaction out of building those programs and really watching what happens from day one to 2, 3 years down the line and how I'm able to build that holistic program and what that really does to an organization, not just revenue, but you're increasing jobs, you're bringing more people in, you're expanding your skills outside of sales and not just focusing on sales. You're looking at now customer support, professional services. You enablement has really evolved into, I like the term revenue enablement because you aren't just focusing on sales anymore. I mean, and once you get into that role, you realize that really quickly that once you start to put in all these great programs into place, everybody else wants a piece of the pie, and that's always a good thing. So that's what I was doing for the last 2 years.
That's I love the fact that you are one of those people who really like to go into a growth company and to build from the ground up. That's kind of where I've lived for
Yeah.
my last three roles, which um, is always a challenge because you tend to be the one and only person in enablement.
Yeah.
And but as you walk into someplace new, how are you like? What is, and I don't want to say strategy of the business because I want to separate that out. But I'm curious, like, how are you strategizing as an enablement professional, whether it's you're the director or the VP? How are you strategizing building that program from zero, from nothing?
So in the first, I mean, the easiest way for me to do it is almost like a 30, 60, 90, right?
Okay.
So first 30 days, especially in the first couple of weeks, you're kind of you're definitely getting your feet wet. You're having all those, you know, 20-minute meet and greet phone calls, things like
Yep.
that. I start at the highest level possible. So I usually try to really focus on the executive leadership team. So CEO, CRO, most of the time you ultimately report into a CRO now in our function. Um, and really just have a very open, transparent conversation about where the company is and what they feel is missing from a revenue driver standpoint. And I work backwards from there. So I find out what the strategic goals are, and then I slowly but surely start to build out a plan. And the next thing I do, especially as a, person that's really been in this role by themselves. I mean, I've had small teams before, but I think right now a lot of us are in this alone. I look at the tech stack next because that is really your main area of support. And I analyze that and I look at the adoption rates and do we have too much technology? Do we not have enough? And the technology that we have is probably good, but do these people really know how to use that technology? Right. So, um, and things like sales readiness software, there's so many options for us now versus 10 or 15 years ago when we were doing everything on an Excel spreadsheet. It's
Yeah.
amazing. So, I think it's important for people that go into this role to really understand that they need to know in their mind what they want their role to look like. And they need to be very upfront with that in the interview process. And sadly, if you don't have some type of enablement software or readiness software, especially with where we're going with automation and AI, that tells me a couple things, right? One, the organization that you're interviewing with doesn't really understand the function of enablement, the true function, and that they may not be willing to invest in you like you would hope for. And, you might only be in that role for 12 to 18 months.
And
I
that's
mean, so
actually two good points that you bring up there is number one, knowing what you want your role to look like within a company and not necessarily just being defined by the job description that's out there.
correct.
Because that's a lot of great clues. And then
Yeah.
what you said, secondly, was understanding what they may have in terms of enablement software as well. One of the great questions that I actually ask all the time, and I'd love to hear your thought on this, is so tell me about the budget that you have for sales enablement beyond headcount. And it's one of those questions, and
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on like asking that question. But what I've noticed is it's one of those questions that trips a lot of people up.
Yeah. Well, that's a great question because it does exactly what I just said. And I think it's 100% a fair question. I just think on the back end, you need to be prepared with your answer because they may not, their answer might be, well, what would we need besides headcount? Or can you clarify? We thought we already had a really good enablement function. Or some people might be really transparent. I've been lucky in a couple of roles where they've been transparent enough to say, we have no idea what we're doing when it comes to
Yeah.
enablement. We just think that we need it. And my response to that is, why do you think you need it?
Right.
And, like, did someone tell it? Did your CMO or VP of marketing come to you and say, we really need a sales enablement function? And you just said, okay,
Yep.
without understanding it. So I think it's in this day and age and in this market, especially, I mean, take it from me because I'm out there. I think it's absolutely fair to ask that question. And I think it's a great question that uncovers a lot of things that you would want to know going into a new position.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that, the role that, or the way that you like to think of your role and your ideal situation. Because for me too, when I'm out there looking, just like you are, but and I have my own preferences. I like smaller companies, and I like the startup world, and I like to be like the first one in to enablement, but that's not always the case. But when you're thinking about the roles that you are going after, give me some characteristics of A, the company, and B, uh, the philosophy that you hope they have about enablement that you know that you can be successful in.
Sure. So, you know, again, I think for me, I'm being picky this time around. There's a lot every day. There's hundreds of new enablement roles that come on the market, and you just it's definitely not about the money for me. I mean, the money is important, yes, of course, but like I'm looking for a company that really fully understands the sales enablement function that when meeting with a recruiter, they would say, yes, we already have a mind tickle or a high spot or a seismic. We already have someone, that's the dream come true, right? We want you to have 1 to 3 people underneath you, identify what that would, look like. And, can you do that? And talk to me about how you would build a program. I had an interview a couple days ago where I did a 30, 60, 90 for the recruiter. It was an initial call, and she was like, nobody's ever done that for me before.
Mm.
And so, and I just have that in my head, when she asked me about my career, I just went into this, I told my story, right? I have a digital marketing degree, so I'm a good storyteller. But when I didn't plan it out, it just came out, I was like, well, in the first 30 days I would do this, and then 60, 90. And she was like, we didn't even have that in the job description. She was like, no one's ever done that, before. So things like that, um, I think set you apart. But philosophy wise, what I really want to empower, I really want to educate, and I really want to optimize, right? So I want to be given the opportunity to do that. And a lot of that revolves around budget. And, again, going back to your question, really important question. So I think you need to know going in, you can't do those things without looking, into the future at least a year, or specifically, I would say really 2, to build a full, world-class holistic enablement program. You need 24 months. And you have to be able to measure. That's another, enablement is really the backbone of it is measurement and reinforcement. And if you don't have a way to measure your programs, if you go into a company and they say, well, we have, Microsoft Teams, and that's what we use for content management. And, what do you mean by measurement? You just need to be, you need to be really confident in that, because if you can't measure your program after 12 months, it's probably a problem. And if they don't understand that going in, they may not even know that, we have tools specifically for enablement that can do that also contain conversational AI, content management, digital sales rooms, all the things that revenue and forecasting, all the things that we need to do our job effectively. They probably don't even realize those exist. So that would be my answer to that.
Yeah, two questions that really came out of that piece that you're just speaking about is number one, and I'll ask them separately. So number one, you want to measure your programs, you want to measure your effectiveness. Tell me what the top three things that you're focusing on in enablement, if it's independent from an organization, because I know some are very specific on what they want to measure. But if you had your druthers, what would be the top three that you're measuring, that you're gonna keep your eye on like a hawk?
So I would say deal size, number one. Are we bringing more revenue into these deals? how long it takes to get there. So, time to first sale, because a lot of what we do in enablement leads to that, whether it be a successful onboarding program or everboarding now, really not just onboarding, but are the tools that we're creating and using helping that individual or that team close the business, in a shorter time frame. And pipeline. I mean, lead generation is enablement and marketing are really coming together as one in 75% of the organizations that I see out there. It's you're either reporting into a CMO or the number one bullet on the job description is, can you collaborate with marketing? And how have you been doing that? So I've been lucky in my career that I've reported into a couple of really, really good GTM organization. So I've learned a lot, because before that I reported in directly into sales or into sales ops, and it's just a different world. And I have great things to say about both, but those three things I would say are major when you're talking about, if you're sitting down with a CRO and they would ask me the same question, that's what I would say.
Yeah. I think those are all super important. I don't think I could disagree with you on any of those three at all. If I had to choose,
There's more, but those are
yeah,
the top three. I mean,
for
it's
sure.
all about driving revenue.
And
So
then the second question that came out of one of your responses there was, if you're going into a situation that has nothing, that you're building from the scratch, what are the first, besides the CRM, because hopefully they have
they have that.
they
Yeah.
have
So
hopefully they have that.
if they don't, you probably don't want to work for
Right,
them.
right. I mean, I've seen some that have some pretty bad CRMs,
Yeah.
and we won't mention names, but beyond that, um, I'm curious as to, all right, here are the three tools that we need to have, and
Okay.
they could be a tool that has a combination of some, because I know,
Mm-hmm.
for instance, like Outreach is really trying to become an all-in-one platform at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
what are the first three that you're like, these are non-negotiables when we're looking at tech?
Got it. So Sales Navigator,
Really?
number one.
Okay. Tell me
I
about
that's the
that
one
a little
that
bit.
what's
Why
that?
is Sales Navigators number one?
Well, not number one. I mean, I'm just
Okay.
rattling off like one, two, three.
All right.
I mean, if I'm being selfish, sales readiness software, like a Mind Tickle or, a Seismic, one size fits all that has everything I would need built into it. Because you've got like a tech stack of four built into one when you
Yeah.
have a platform like that. um, Sales Navigator or Sales Loft or Zoom Info, lead gen, anything that helps with leads, because a lot of organizations sadly don't have inside sales organizations anymore, and if they do, a lot of times they get rid of them. So
Yeah.
you need to have something to help sales, keeping in mind that you're probably only one person, you don't have a team. You've got to have some kind of technology helping sales generate leads. And then if you don't have an all-encompassing sales readiness platform or something like that, I would say conversational AI tool is really, really important. I love what Replicate is doing. I
I do
think
too.
that software that's good. That's the next generation of sales
Yep.
enablement. That's where we're going. What's been going around LinkedIn with the cold calling? I mean, I went into their website and it's incredible what they're doing. It's really cool.
Yeah. I don't know if you
That's
saw
what
the
that's
I
the
don't
future, right?
yeah, I don't know if you saw the video that I produced with them. So I interviewed them to do so they could show a full demo, and
Yeah.
then also
I
with
didn't see it, but
Quantified.
I'll watch it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so
Quantified
cool.
is another one that's doing really great work there.
Yeah.
Sell Me This Pen. I like what they're doing. I think on the user interface side, they have a little bit of, of work to catch up on. But you're right. That whole area is going to be, I think, really consequential, not only over the next 6 8 months, because you're going to see a lot of changes and a
Yeah.
lot of, especially when GPT-5 comes out, or
Like, yeah.
Claude updates. etc. You're going to see some crazy stuff happening with those particular three tools. But over the
Yeah.
next 6-10 years, you're gonna have it so part of your dialers, during the day, like on your list, is actually just going to be an AI
Right.
bot that all of a sudden you're calling what you think is a real lead, and it's a training
Yeah.
piece. you
Yeah.
know your manager's going to be able to go in there and say, you know Jill needs to work on X, so we're going to give her this particular bot, and it's going to be stuck in her actions for the day.
Yeah. And I mean, you and I both know traditional sales enablement and training doesn't work. Videos, things like that, it's a 20% likelihood that they'll even remember any of it. But active learning, you're in the 70 to 80 percentile now for, retention, and just do it over, do it over, do it over. I was an athlete in high school, and I just, remember that, just when we didn't have any of this technology, it was, just do it again, do it again, do it
Yep.
again, so it's the same thing. And what they're doing is incredible now with these different softwares. I mean, I remember when I implemented MindTickle 4 years ago at Calyx, and I thought back then, I was like, this is like one of the greatest things that's ever happened to me, because I can do, I can video coach, I can almost be a virtual sales manager, from my laptop. And now it's gotten, in 4 years, it's grown so much more with the AI component. It's crazy. That was just the introduction to it back then.
Yeah. I'm excited about that particular area
Yeah.
and space. So as we kind of, I want to respect your time. I know that we scheduled just
Oh,
30 minutes. So,
yeah.
but as we wrap up here, one of the things that's just interesting, and this is outside of your particular journey, but I always like to speak to people who are brand new to sales enablement as well. And if you had the opportunity to talk to somebody who was saying, "Hey, I'm I've been in sales, or I haven't been in sales. Maybe I used to be a teacher, um, but they're interested in becoming a sales enablement professional." What would you say to them?
Well, first of all, I would say it's definitely not a bad choice. You see a lot of things on LinkedIn and online that, would tell you maybe to shy away from it. And it's kind of the
Yep.
flavor of the month, which it's definitely not. I mean, the work that we do in enablement is extremely impactful, and it really can change people's lives. I mean, you can take a rep from, a 10 to 15, 20% close rate and send them to President's Club within a year if you're doing your job correctly, or, you watch that revenue dial go up, and it's amazing. So, what I would say is welcome to one of the best industries out there, and just make sure that you know why, you kind of, going back to Simon Sinek, what's your why? Why are you really getting into this industry? Because it is extremely competitive now. 15 years ago, there was a handful of us.
Right.
And now, it's become just this full blown, amazing industry of people. And the other thing I would say is rely on people like me and you. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be over educate yourself. Always try to stay ahead of the curve. But I certainly wouldn't ever turn anyone away from coming into our industry, because I think it's great. And I will continue to think that I'm extremely passionate about it. And I think if you're new coming into it, you have to just really ask yourself, like, why am I passionate about it? What am I really passionate about? I mean, like, I love leadership development. If I could do that all day long for a growth company, I would, right? There's so many facets of it, and you just have to kind of figure out which area you really want to focus on,
Sure.
to make yourself better.
I think those are all great words of wisdom in there. And separately, I'm curious, do you this is something that really sticks out to me, is the lack in job descriptions that talk about leadership training and enablement. And I'm curious if you ever had any thoughts on that.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, it's one of the, when I get into a role, and even sometimes when I'm interviewing, like specifically for this role that I'm interviewing for right now, I mean, it's it's always a topic for me, and I'll just come right out and say it, like, how are you developing your executive leadership team? What have you done to develop them? If, the bottom line is any program that we put together, it could be the best program in the world. If your leadership team doesn't buy into it, it will go nowhere.
Right.
It will fail. And all of our stuff is top down driven, whether we want to believe it or not, and just like somebody like me that's been doing this for a long time, you that's been doing this for a long time, we need continued development, and so do they. I mean, so do they. They don't understand a lot of the things that are going on with automation. They don't understand a lot of the newer sales strategies out there. And you don't have to focus on one strategy. I mean, the last program that I created, Airs Global, was built on, Challenger, MedPick, and Miller Hyman.
Get
So,
a lot going on there.
yeah, well, you can piecemeal it, right? It's
Yep.
and it's all about, and it's about buyer journey. So if there's a different, there could be different strategies backing that journey, along the way. But leadership development, if you don't have that in some way, shape, or form, and if you can't get them to buy into it, it can be a huge bottleneck. It
Jill,
will.
thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. I definitely want to take a moment to highlight some of your experience, share it out there with the world. You've had some really great words of wisdom for people who maybe are just starting. But I also hope it gives a glimpse into people, for people who are looking to hire someone amazing in sales enablement, and they'll reach out, and maybe by then you'll have already gotten your next role, but you can then maybe make some suggestions for others that are
Oh,
looking.
absolutely. And what I would say too for everyone that watches this is, please, you know, I've had the LinkedIn community and just the sales enablement community as a whole has been so helpful in my journey. And I would love to do that for someone else. And there's roles that I look at all the time that are not right for me, that I'm so happy to share with anyone, because it is a tough market. But use your resources, including me, including Ryan, and LinkedIn and Slack, and anything you can do, because a lot of times that hidden gem is just out there and you just haven't found the right resource. But I'm always happy to help.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Joe.
Thank you.